Good morning, everybody. This is Oliver Joyce from Whiskey Barrel Studios, and welcome to my world. This is the great outdoors of the Australian bush, and today we're going on a little hike. We're going on a game dev hike, and this is an idea that my good friend John Stayscale came up with a little while ago, and we did a test run of this about a month ago, which he's going to release on his channel in once he's edited it. And that was a great hike that he and I did, and we talked about game development and just the business in general. And I thought I would do one of these for myself, just for you guys, so I could talk a little bit about just whatever comes into my mind as I'm hiking. And I'm going to be hiking for the next few hours, and as I sort of find interesting things to talk about, game development related, swords and sandals related, life related, or whatever, I'll be firing up the camera and just chatting. So please come with me, enjoy the beautiful Australian wilderness, because it's unlike anything else, and there's some pretty cool sights and sounds along the way. So I'm looking forward to taking you on here with me. We're in beautiful Thornlie, which is my home suburb here in Sydney, Australia, and this track is maybe 5 minutes drive from my house, and it's really beautiful. It's peaceful, and as you can see, 360 degree bushland everywhere. So yeah, all right, well, let's talk about our first topic coming up soon. Listen carefully, and you may be able to hear galahs and cockatoos screeching in the background. They're native birds to Australia, and they sound terrifying. They're these white birds with a sort of a kind of golden crest, and I can imagine the first settlers to Australia thinking, what the hell are those things? Because they pretty scary. They sound like sort of jets flying overhead, and often in the afternoons over my house these things will fly by in a squadron. First thing I wanted to talk about today was the balance between game development and the rest of your life, and this is a tough one. As a game developer, it always, or for many people, it starts off as a hobby, and that, like many creative passions, is how you should get your start. You should do something because you want to do it, because it interests you, and not just for the sake of making money. And like all hobbies, you start off small and you put some time into it, and if you enjoy it, generally you become better at it, and you will find that you spend more and more time doing it. And when you're young, you have a lot of time, and you can choose to spend that time, on whatever you want, really. And there's, aside from school or college or university and jobs and so on, you generally have a fair bit of free time. But as you get older, that time gets less, and as your hobby becomes more serious, you want to dedicate more time to that. And you often need to, as your skills get better. You do get faster with what you do, but you also tend to do more detailed work. And for game development especially, there's an old sort of saying, when will this game be finished? And it's basically, how long is a piece of string? Because a game can be as long as you want it to be. And there's a famous saying from, I think, I don't know if it was Miyamoto or the Nintendo Mario creator, who said, a game is never finished, only released. It might have been him, it might have been someone else, but it's very true. And you can spend many years on a game and never really feel like it's done, but you've got to release it at some point. But what I want to talk about first is game dev particularly can become all consuming, and you do hear a lot of stories about burnout and people working very long hours on their games to nighttime, and all through 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and then sleeping and getting up and doing it all again, and just getting burnt out. And some people do this professionally, and there's stories from companies about employees working 60 and 70 hours and that kind of thing, and it's too much. But even if you do it for yourself or as a hobby, you need to be able to balance what you love doing with doing other things as well, and finding other things you love. And so for me, I try to, as we go over this little bridge here, there's a bridge, little bubbling and babbling brook in the background. I try to make sure I get out as much as I can, because that's where I rebuild my, for lack of a better term, creative capital. And that's a term that I really like, that my another friend of mine, Silas Rowe, the game developer behind Smashtastic Cricket, coined this phrase. And what he means by creative capital is you have a certain amount of creativity stored up here, and eventually the more you use it when you're working, it gets depleted until you can find yourself in a space again that renews that energy. And that space is different for many people. For me, it's the bush. It's being outdoors in mountains and forests and climbing over rocks and sitting next to waterfalls and all that sort of idyllic, just being somewhere organic and away from technology. Phone, of course, the exception, because I have to make this video today. But in general, I like to sort of switch off and just listen to nature, and sometimes I put a podcast or something on, but I digress. What I mean by rebuilding creative capital is you have to find a space that you can be that is away from your project. And that may be the beach, it may be a forest, it may be seeing friends, it might be doing another hobby that is more tactile. That might be, woodwork or some kind of craft thing, or getting out in a garden, feeling the soil in your hands. And there's a lot to be said for being away from the thing you love. And it's that absence makes the heart grow fonder, because if you're too close to a project, you will get sick of it. And that happens with many games and writers' experience, that kind of thing. But when you're out and about, your mind is free to wander. And by being out and just letting your mind go where it wants to, often the best ideas for your game will happen. And that's a very important thing for you. It also is very good for your health. It goes without saying that you gotta, not be at the computer 12 hours a day. And, we're often all guilty of that when you get caught up in something, but you got to make sure you take breaks, even if it's to get up, walk around your apartment or your house, or just go down to the shops and get a coffee. Keep moving, get yourself a Fitbit. I don't have one. I have a watch which is broken, but I still like to wear it because it's sentimental. But can't keep track of your steps, and just find little goals to keep yourself moving, because most game developers are young and healthy, but you're not always going to be. And having witnessed, older people confronting their own mortality, this is a serious topic and so on, but you don't always have your health, and you can't take it for granted. So, just doing little things. It doesn't have to mean, hit the gym every bloody day, that kind of thing. But what it means is just, if you want to be a game developer or any other kind of creative role that takes a lot of time, make sure that you look after yourself in other ways, and try to eat right, try to keep the legs moving, look away from the screen, that kind of thing. And be around people. I often find I'm cocooned in my own little game dev world, and I wouldn't say it gets lonely, because I don't really find it lonely, because it's such an interesting place, in my own head, and the world of Swords and Sandals, or whatever game that I'm making. But it can become exhausting, and I think it's time, every now and again, you have to unplug and just, be around other people, get their ideas, talk about your game or whatever, but, just talk about other things. You'll find that, this is all common sense. I'm not really telling you anything you probably haven't already heard if you're wanting to get into this, but it's something that we have to remind ourselves to get better at. Oh, look, I'm going to turn the camera off now and switch because I'm going to show you something pretty cool. This is a kookaburra. This is a native Australian bird that is really cool. It's very iconic, and it makes a sound. And there's one. He's seen me. He's interested to know what I'm up to, and I'm interested in what he's up to. And the other day, my wife and son and I were out, and a kookaburra swooped down on us and stole a piece of cheese from our sandwich. So that was kind of interesting. It's about as close as I've really ever gotten to one. And I'm trying not to scare him off or anything, but they got sharp beaks. They're not particularly dangerous by Australian creature standards, but they're very iconic. So if you've never seen a kookaburra, that's one. Well, this next topic I want to talk about is emotions in game development. The emotional journey of being a game developer. It's, it's funny to think about a technical process such as programming, or, the creative process of writing a book or whatever, being emotional, but emotions are at the key of anything you do creatively. You pour your life into these kind of things, and naturally you're going to feel many different emotions on your journey. So if you've never made a game before and you're wondering, the psychology of what happens when you make a game, you're going to find this little topic interesting. This is a little steep section here, as you can see. We're heading down here. The first emotion I usually feel when making a game, naturally, is excitement, because it starts with, actually before excitement, it's inspiration. That first lightning flash moment that comes to you, often out of the blue, often on one of those, creative capital building hikes or whatever it is. And it's usually something like, wouldn't it be cool if this? Here we are at a waterfall. Pretty cool. I'm gonna have to step over this waterfall now, so the camera gets wet. That's the end of our game dev hike. But no, stepped over it. No problem. It wasn't really that big, but it is beautiful. It's stunning. You can sort of see behind me there. This hike is full of rivers and little creeks to hike across and that kind of thing. But yeah, inspiration is where it begins, and often you'll write this down, you'll scramble to write it down, or you'll keep it in your head, and sometimes you're already working on another project when this inspiration happens, and that leads to the second emotion, which is confusion, because you think, should I abandon that other project because this idea is so much cooler? And often you do, and that is the way to never releasing a game. You do that enough, you have 10 projects which are not finished and none that are released, none making you money if that's your goal. But say you don't have any projects, or you've finished your previous project and you now have time to make this new game. Inspiration gives way to excitement, because you have this blank slate and all these ideas that you've probably written down, and directions you want to take the game and so on. And that's a really, really exciting phase in the game dev journey, because you're basically thinking, wow, what could this game be? It could be anything I want. And often at this stage, your ideas are very, very pie in the sky and quite grand, and you really have to sort of, knuckle down and, cut a few of them. But excitement often gives way to, before that, excitement becomes adrenaline, and you start working. In the first few weeks you work really hard and you build all the interesting things to your game and so on, and you start either building a prototype of the game or just doing the bits that you enjoy. It might be like, this game is based around a ninja grappling hook, so you design a ninja grappling hook and that kind of thing. Then the reality kicks in that, this project might be a bit bigger than I thought, because I'm a month into development and I'm still only working on a ninja grappling hook. And then that excitement becomes, well, often focus, because you knew what you were getting into. Certainly if you've made a few projects, you know that most games are way bigger than you expect them to be, even if you cut out features and so on. I heard a great quote by John Carmack, the genius programmer behind Doom, and they asked him, "Oh, why are you such a good programmer? Why are you so, efficient and so on?" He says, "Look," something like this anyway. He said, "I still miss deadlines. I definitely, like every programmer, like every game developer, I still miss deadlines. It's just that most game developers miss their deadlines by 200%, and I might only miss them by 50%. You know what I mean?" So I thought that was interesting, and that sort of stuck with me, because it also means, take heart if you feel like, your game is taking too long. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself in the game dev emotional journey, because focus sometimes gives way then to doubt. Is this project too big? Is this even what I want to work on? Is there another cool idea that's just popped into my head? Is there no longer a market for the game that I want to make if you have commercial aspirations for your game? Am I qualified to make this game? Do I have the skills? Is there some kind of technical limitation? All these things start to pop into your head like some Pandora's box opening up and just, laying the seeds of doubt. And that can be really scary. And often it's that time that you will abandon the project. And sometimes you have to listen to these doubts, because there's something called sunk cost and the sunk cost fallacy. And what that is, well, some game developers, and when I say game developers, apply this term to any creative project, really, be it a book, TV show, whatever it is that you're making, but for the purposes of this game development. If you've spent a certain amount of time on a project, time being money, you will often have the idea that you should see it through to completion because you've already spent a certain amount of time, right? But that's the sunk cost fallacy, because if your intuition is right and your game isn't going to be a hit, what's the point in spending another 3 or 4 months on it just so you can say you finished it? Sometimes the answer is yes. You have to decide that for yourself. Sometimes the answer is no. You were right to abandon it. And a lot of big projects, and certainly in commercial terms, big studios will shut down games quite far along into development, when they've finished art and cutscenes and music and everything, because either the market has changed or the budget is run out for the game or whatever it is. They don't think it's viable anymore. Devastating for the developers, but it is a business, and a cutthroat business. It certainly is. So doubt is the next phase. And then if you can get through that doubt, which is hard, and if you know how, tell me, because I suffer that, and many game developers do, and my own way through is just often blind self-belief and willful ignorance of the past and my past failures, and that the next one will be big. Hey, you got to believe. If you don't believe in yourself, this is a cliche, but if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will, right? So sometimes you have to have that belief that what you're making is something that the public wants. And that's what I often tell myself to get past the doubt, is that, hey, there was something in this original idea. There was something that made it special and something that, people want. And you have to motivate yourself however you can, even if it's, look, hey, I don't think the sunk cost way of motivating yourself is wise, unless I think if you're, let's say 70% of the way through a project, then certainly it's worth it. Just go that extra 30%, finish it off. If it is 70%, if you're pretty sure of that. If you think the project is less than half finished, maybe you should call it. And because you can and do learn from all these game dev mistakes. You certainly do. And say you get past that, then the next phase can be one of the most rewarding and productive phases of the game dev journey. And that phase is the phase of, we'll say focus part 2, but renewed focus, frenetic focus, focus with purpose. And this is where you go, I have committed myself to this game, I'm going to get it done. And often in this phase, as I walk across a little mossy rock here, and in this phase is when you decide, you know what, I have to be a bit ruthless, I have to cut out features, I have to decide what is really important to the gameplay. What are things that originally I thought were a good idea, no longer a good idea? What can I cut out? What can I tweak? That kind of thing. And having those ideas in your head and knowing what you can get rid of are very important. All right, yeah, and so we were talking about the state of renewed focus, and that means getting rid of features that, you know, may make your game twice as long to develop, but may not make them twice as good. Right now I'm climbing up a hill. It's hard to sort of see the gradient of it, but it's a good metaphor for this section of the game dev journey, because it is a climb. Long after it stopped being fun, when you're building the menus and the save game stuff, ironing out bugs that have been there for ages, long after all the sound effects and fun animations are in the game, and long after you've tested the game 10,000 times and fought the same boss monster a million times, finding the same bug, that is the grind. And that can lead to the next phase, which is not doubt, but often either resentment, or depression is far too strong a word, but often you just kind of will question why you're doing it. You're bored with the project, you're not really even sure if it's going to make money, you are thinking about other projects, other things you'd like to do. That is because the renewed focus phase only can take you so far, but it's one more trough in the peaks and troughs of anything, you know, highs and lows. But you know, you do get past that because you're so close to the end. You realize that just one more push and you will get over the line. Finally, the last stage, as we reach the top of this hill, you can see behind me, we're pretty high. It's hard to tell really, but we are up high, trust me. Is stage when you release your game out into the world, and that is twofold. One emotion is relief, a big feeling of relief. It's over, it's done. But strangely, there was another phase, another emotion that hits you, and that emotion is, how do I put it into terms? It's almost depression. It really is. It's like I said before, it's a strange kind of feeling of emptiness, of this thing that you've been working on for so long is out there. And for most game developers, your game's not going to set the world on fire. As I drop my hat, let's put the hat on, the Survivor hat. There we go. Survivor, one of my favorite shows. Survivor's ready! And you know, it's another good metaphor for game development, because the ones that succeed are the survivors, really. You know, it's not the first game that you make often that makes any money. It's not the second or third or the fourth. It takes many, many years for most game developers to make a profit or to have a game that people know, because you got to work on your craft and you have to, you know, improve on the things that you got wrong. And that's where the feeling of emptiness happens when you release a game, and you know, it either doesn't get much coverage, doesn't get much reviews, or it gets bad reviews. And we've all had it. I mean, I've had games that have really tanked, you know. I was fortunate early in the Mead's first Swords and Sandals, first two Swords and Sandals games did very well as flash games, and that gave me a sense of false confidence that everything I could do would be a hit. It was not to be. I've had more failures than successes for sure, and I'm still not profitable enough to do this full time. I earn enough money from Swords and Sandals and the related things to that to be able to do it 2 days a week, and that's a success of sorts. And so you have to fill that emptiness with the relief, and I think an emotion that you should feel, even if you don't, when you finish a game, and that is pride. We so often forget that what we have achieved, very few actually do, because so many people start out wanting to make a game. Many of them don't even get any further than the first tutorial. It's too hard. Or, the first little prototype doesn't work, or it's boring, or the many stages that we've talked about. Many people will fall along the way, and if you've released a game, no matter how simple, how poorly received, or how bad you think it is, or how bad other people think it is, the fact is you are ahead of most game developers. And even though you think there's so many hundreds of thousands of games out there, for any one of those, there was 10 or 100 that never got released. So you need to remember to feel proud when you release a game. That's the final stage of the game dev emotional journey, until, rinse and repeat, inspiration strikes again and you get back onto the mountain again. What we see here are Banksia men. And they're a strange little protrusion from a tree like this. You can see there's lots of them. They're quite famous because of an Australian kids story called Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, about these two little, called like gumnut babies, and I don't know if I can see any gumnuts on this tree, but they're these two little babies that had these little gumnut hats. They go off on big adventures, and the Banksia men, these things were the bad guys. So there you go. So whenever you see them in the Australian bush, a lot of Australians have quite a fond memory of their childhood and those characters. I mean, these books have been around for 100 years or something, a long time. So here's another pretty little flower. May not be something you've seen before. I'm not a particularly horticultural person, but I do love the Aussie bush as we continue along our game dev journey. Right now, it's time for a well-earned lunch break. I've been hiking for about an hour or so, and it's midday. It's 24 degrees Celsius, or about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's spring right now, and it's beautiful. It's basically the perfect temperature for a hike. So I'm going to sit down and have some lunch, and we'll talk a little more. Lunch is finished, so we continue our game dev journey onward and upward. Another bubbling damn brook. A bubbling brook. That's stuck in my head now. Go over a little bridge. Some noisy birds down here. I don't know what that one is. I should know, because it's a very common sound in the Australian bush. It's nice and cool down here. It's as I said, it's a warm spring day here in Sydney. Perfect hiking conditions. Noisy birds. I'm trying to record. Anyway, hopefully they don't drown out what I'm trying to say. We'll come back to this once those birds have stopped. Nope, they're showing no signs of slowing down, and I believe they actually are galahs, just making a slightly different noise. Cockatoos or galahs. They may be the same thing. Anyway, what were we talking about? We were talking about this new topic, which is support networks. on your game dev journey, it's very important to have people close to you, friends and family, supporting you. Equally as important to have someone or some people inside the game dev arena to support you and champion you and inspire you, and for you to inspire them along the way. And I have 3 or 4, maybe even more, sort of acquaintances on Twitter and so on. But in particular, I have 4 good friends who are all game developers who've, released a game commercially as part of a team or for themselves. Tom Gattenhoff, an excellent dungeon master and a creative genius who's worked on a number of projects. James McNess, who's a fantastic artist and very meticulous game developer who works on a lot of commercial projects. Silas Rue, who's the creator of a game called Smashtastic Cricket and the inventor of the creative capital term that we talked about earlier. But most important, for me anyway, in my game dev circle is a guy called John Stayscale, who I've mentioned many times in my videos. And he is the owner of a studio called Lost Relic Games. And he's working on a project called Blood and Mead, which is a wonderful, irreverent indie game platformer starring a Viking, a drunk Viking who has a temper problem and he has a drinking problem and he has a lot of things to overcome. And it's really charming and it's fun, and he's been working on this game for, I don't know, maybe 3 years, maybe more, and it's in the home stretch now. And what I'm most impressed about is I've seen this from inception right through now to what is a really top looking game, and you should check it out. It's on Steam to Wishlist at Blood and Mead, or bloodandmead.com, and you can check out some more about it. But if you like that kind of game, adventure puzzle platformers with great combat elements and things, I really encourage you to do check it out. But I wanted to talk to you a bit about how John has inspired me and how I try and inspire him and something that you can hopefully get for yourself is having another game developer who's on a similar path to you really makes it. You need external motivation, basically. Not everybody can, fire up the engine themselves. Sometimes you need someone else who's in a similar situation to go, yeah, man, I understand. Like, it takes ages to build these levels, or yeah, I'm going through this problem. I've got this bug in the game that I can't fix. And you realize you're not going through it alone. Like every endeavor, you have to have peers to support you. And if you don't have someone, I work with John, and we work part-time together, and we used to work together. We've known each other for about 7 or 8 years, and so I get to see him every week, and we have lunch and talk shop and come up with ideas. And we've done a longer version of this game dev hike video, which I'll be really interested to see when it comes out in in the next month or two. And we talked about a lot of ideas about game development, and you'll see how much easier it is when 2 people talk to each other than just me sort of riffing at the camera, because I'm just, obviously we're all making it up as we go, but ideas just will bounce off another person, you know what I mean? And you formulate things. So if you don't have somebody easily accessible like I do in John, you can go to game jams and game dev meetups, and there's usually, most major cities have them. And if you don't live in a big city, if you're developing in a tiny little, wooden cabin in deeper Siberia or whatever, which people do, and they make, they can be successful. Online can be good. So Discord channels, there are YouTube channels with game developers offering advice, much like I am, but, in a much more consistent and, probably more professional capacity, because half the time I'm just shooting from the hip, and you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I make tons of mistakes. But it's really important to have someone else to bounce ideas off, to give ideas to, because they will welcome your ideas. And the closer you are with someone, the more you need to be able to give them honest feedback that others may necessarily not. Family and friends will often say what you want to hear, but another game developer that you know and trust should be able to tell you, hey man, game is too big, or I don't like this mechanic, or you're doing this wrong. Or tell you why they like something rather than saying, oh, it's really good. One of the things a little annoyance, might just be me, is that when people see my game, they often say, oh, I love the artwork. And I say, oh, that's cool. I didn't do the artwork. I did the cartoon art for Swords and Sandals, the original stuff, but most of the new games, I have people do the art for me and I pay them. And it's almost discouraging to just kind of go, oh, what else do you like? And they might say, I love the music. And I'll say, I didn't do the music. And then I'll go, oh, okay, well, game looks cool. And it's funny, it's like, it's a vanity thing really, because no one is really going to say, oh, I love the game mechanics and you've really done this level in such a tight way that it all flows seamlessly. Only another game developer will say that. But you know, other game developers are important to have in your network. That's all I wanted to say in this little chapter. And if you need someone, get up on Discord and find game dev channels. You can also join the Swords and Sandals channel and chat to me. I'm not there that often, but I'll put a link at the bottom of this video. You know, I'm always happy to offer advice to people wherever I can, because I've been doing this, you know, for over 20 years now. I may not look it, but I'm over 40. I'm 41. Go figure. Trim 41 with a little grey in the beard. The next topic I wanted to talk about is something that not a lot of game developers will openly acknowledge, and that is jealousy. Jealousy is not an emotion that, you know, many people are proud to admit they have. And certainly in the game dev world, we are all, you know, on the surface, and we try to aspire to be supportive of all our game developer colleagues and, you know, people you know and people you don't know. And, you know, as I said in the last topic with the support network, you are there to support them and encourage them and, you know, wish them all the best in their success. And they do the same for you. But the reality is, the game dev world is fragmented, and like all industries, is competitive, ultra competitive. There's thousands of games out there, hundreds of thousands. And as much as we like to think we're all one big, united, you know, supportive industry, we're only human too. And I will be the first to admit I get jealous of other games' successes. Not all games, because, you know, if you were like that, you would, you know, you might as well get out of the industry, because there's always going to be games that are way bigger hits than yours, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's not who you're competing with. But every now and again, I'll give you an example. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago really, a game came out and hit the world by storm. It's a game called the Untitled Goose Game. You've probably heard of it. I'm not sure where it came from. It was based on a silly meme, or it became a silly meme about a goose. I mean, it's a charming game. It really is. A little goose going around an English village, you know, biting people on the bum and stealing their rakes and stuff like that. And for some reason, this game captured the public's imagination and just has sold in the millions now, I think. It's done really, really well. And the developers are from Melbourne, Australia, so they're local. And my first reaction upon seeing this news about this game doing so well was, at first, like, oh, that's curious, that's kind of, wow, interesting. Not a concept I thought of, and cool. But then every day I started seeing this come up on Reddit. Yet another meme about the game, yet another, you know, story about the game coming up on games journalisms, and then on regular local television, you know, television crews going to these guys' studios and interviewing them, and the craziness that surrounded them. And I kind of thought, what the hell is this all about? And it's irrational, but I was jealous, and I still don't know how I feel about it, and I don't know, I mean, I know why, but sometimes, you know, we're not supposed to feel like this, but I felt jealous, and not of the game's success per se, but just of the just the way it had been embraced and why that game and why not any other game. I mean, it's back in the Flash days, there were tons and tons of novelty. I like to call it the novelty game. There were so many novelty games of all wonderful, weird walks of life, but none of them, to a greater or less extent, had that kind of crazy coverage, and worldwide success. And why this game? And on the one hand, I wish these guys all the best, and this is fantastic for them. They've made a ton of money for developers who worked very hard, and over a couple of years, they got a publisher, and they came up with, admittedly now in hindsight, genius idea. But the reality is, the reality is, this is why this game is a success, and not any of the others. Is kind of not baffling, because I can see on one hand, I'm not even trying to say here, except that sometimes jealousy is okay. We are human, and it's just not that I begrudge them the success, but I want it for myself. And I'm sure you do too, of your own games, and you think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I had even a fraction of that coverage? Because the great irony of these things is, with indie games, visibility is all important, and you often, for 99% of us, we get zero visibility or very, very low visibility. I put a post out on Twitter about my game, and you might get 20, 30, maybe 50 or 60 likes and favorites and a couple of retweets, and you go on Reddit, you might even get a couple of hundred. And that's all you can really expect. And often it's not really a great barometer for how your game will go in real life, but at the time it can make you quite humbled and kind of almost just feeling a little disheartened. And then to see that all the game coverage on every channel, on every subreddit and everything is about this ridiculous goose game, it's natural to feel jealous. And you think, hey, spread it around a little bit. I mean, that's not how the world works, but all I'm saying is that it's okay to feel jealous, but then you've got to move past it, because there's always going to be another Untitled Goose Game. Next year it'll be something else. It'll be the Unfriendly Cat Simulator or something like that. There's always going to be something else, and maybe one day it'll be yours. And for me, I sometimes take for granted even the small fame. Fame is a loose term. The internet renown that the Swords and Sandals name has, because many people haven't heard of it, but then many people have. And for many years I didn't realize how kind of beloved this game was for many kids that kind of grew up in the mid 2000s and played the Swords and Sandals games in classrooms, in flash browsers, and at homes, because they didn't have a console, or flash games were free and that kind of thing. And even to this day I get letters and emails and tweets, not so much hand letters, nobody does that anymore, but and that is, I try to reply to all of them and be, and that I should take for granted, and when I should not take for granted, sorry. And whenever I feel these emotions of jealousy of an Untitled Goose Game, I got to remind myself that you're doing okay. You've made something that people remember, and it may never be this worldwide meme, but you did something that made a lot of people happy, and I feel like I'm in a fortunate position because that has allowed me to make Whiskey Barrel Studios and do these things kind of at least part-time and hopefully full-time in the coming years. And so I'm in a good position. And where this relates to you is, if you're a young game developer who's never made anything, or you're a veteran game developer who's never made anything that has really captured the public's imagination, that's all right. You're not done. You're only done until you say you're done. Does that matter to you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, I think some of us, if you're in it for the fame, you're in the wrong industry, because by and large game development doesn't make you famous. If you're in it for the money, again, although you can have a hit, it's like you're building, I've said this before, it's like you're building your own ticket for a lottery, you know, and that's the best way I can describe it. But you know, don't get disheartened. The next game might be the one, and if it is, there'll be someone that will be jealous and they'll say something nasty about it, but often it's just coming from a place of their own insecurities. And for me, my own feelings of jealousy about the Untitled Goose Game are completely unfounded, because it has nothing to do with me. I was never going to make that game, but I just wish I had some of the coverage for my own stuff, you know, and it's natural. So yeah, don't give up. Don't give up on your games, and if one game fails, the next one could succeed, because, you know, why not you? We are about halfway through my hike. I got a little way to go before I turn around, but it's about halfway through, you know, the video, and it's been going for a while. So I'm actually going to divide this into 2 parts and release the second part in a few days. So if you've enjoyed this one, as usual, you know, like and subscribe, and, you know, hit the little bell so you can get more of these videos. And, you know, if you have any game developer friends, share it around, because, you know, maybe there's something in my ramblings that they might find useful. You know, that might be just one gem that allows them to, you know, continue on and be successful, and, you know, make their game the hit that it should be. Until next time, I'm Oliver Joyce from Whiskey Barrel Studios, and I thank you for your company, and I hope you've enjoyed my little tour through the Australian bush, and there will be more of this in the next video as we return home. Bye for now.